For thousands, or even millions of years, they sat at the top of the food chain. And they fascinate us today.
Scotty's bones tell us a lot about its very long and very violent life.
Creatures synonymous with the hunt.
When this animal was standing next to you, he probably would be able to look you right in the eyes.
Saber teeth, mega jaws, and even a king. How did these creatures survive evolution's race?
This healing power that these sharks have has definitely been one of the keys to their survival.
And reach the top of the food chain.
So there's lots of advantages of having these elongated sabers, one of which is the ability to have your prey bleed out very quickly.
And what brought their reign to an end?
There's about a 45 million year gap between the last occurrence of dinosaurs and the first occurrence of Megalodon.
These are Earth's super predators. Dinosaurs embody the extreme in just about every possible way. Their size, power, even the long ago time in which they lived. It's no wonder the more we learn about them, the more they continue to captivate us.
I think that most people have an inherent fascination with animals and with the natural world. And dinosaurs are animals and the natural world on the grandest of scales.
I think it's imagining living on Earth when Earth was a completely different place, filled with fantastical beasts that really ignites the imagination.
And there's one dinosaur that stands out above all the rest.
And they're like dragons or other mythological creatures, but they were real. They are awe-inspiring. And just take T-Rex. T-Rex is a killer whale-sized animal walking around on these giant chicken legs. You can't really compare anything alive to a T-Rex.
We know when the reign of T-Rex ended. In the calamitous dinosaur extinction event 65 million years ago. The result of a massive meteor crash in the Yucatan Peninsula. But how did its rule begin? Scientists have long sought to learn more about the early lineage of the king of tyrant dinosaurs. Where and when can we find the roots of its family tree? Archaeologists are beginning to fill in the timeline.
Almost all we know about Tyrannosaur evolution comes from the final 15 million years of the Cretaceous, leading up to the great T-Rex. There's been this huge gap, 70 million years in the fossil record prior to that, where we've had no fossil evidence of what types of tyrannosaurs were living here, so we really had not pieced together the first 3/4 of the story of Tyrannosaur evolution here in North America.
Lindsay Zano is the head of paleontology at the North Carolina Museum of Natural History. For years now, she's led research teams to a remote part of central Utah, following a trail of small, ancient tyrannosaur teeth, on the hunt for something more.
Whoa, you guys, you're really helpful. It's exciting to be part of the discovery. I think that's my favorite part of the scientific process. And when we're out in the field, we come across things we never expected to find that can define our research for years to come.
And that's just what happened in 2012.
All right, so this is the upper leg bone.
When they found the puzzle pieces to a new species of dinosaur, something very different than anything they'd seen before.
He would have been here. This is the lower leg bone. You can see where we cut a section out to study those growth lines. It was amazing. The first part we saw sticking out of the hill was this bone, and these pieces here are different colors because we actually found each one of these individual pieces trailing down the hill, collected them all, and then the preparation team spent hundreds of hours piecing together each one of these little bits that we had collected from the side of the hill.
After the painstaking excavation, cleaning, and assembly work, the team concluded this leg belonged to a small, maybe 6-foot, 180-pound animal, similar to older tyrannosaur fossils found in Asia, hinting at a continental migration to North America.
It's a very petite animal. It would have been about human size, so when this animal was standing next to you, he probably would have been able to look you right in the eyes. And the tissue between is pretty consistent.
𝗤𝗃 examined cross-sections of the fossilized bone to determine the specimen's age, about 7 at the time of death, just like counting the growth rings you'd find in a tree.
Its growth seemed to be slowing, so it was actually approaching its adult body size when it died. So this actually wasn't just a young tyrannosaur of a big species, it was actually a tiny tyrannosaur.
7 years old when it died, perhaps, but a fossil that's now 96 million years old. And that begins to fill in a 70 million year gap in the record of North American tyrannosaurs. 𝗤𝗃 published her findings in February 2019.
I chose the name 𝗤𝗃𝗆𝗀𝗆 just to represent that this is really the origin story of the T-Rex lineage here in North America. 𝗤𝗄s means the harbinger of doom, and T-Rex is definitely the doom bringer, so it all made sense.
On the dinosaur timeline, small 𝗤𝗄s lands in the mid-Cretaceous period, while the enormous T-Rex lived during the late Cretaceous. With 30 million years in between, what was it that links 𝗤𝗄s to the T-Rex? What helped the doom bringer turn into the Earth's ultimate predator? An evolutionary adaptation not present in those early Asian relatives.
One of the things that makes tyrannosaurs so special is they have a very unique foot. It's very pinched and it's designed for running and also being very agile. So these were incredible hunters that were able to chase down prey. 𝗤𝗄s is the earliest example of those special tyrannosaur adaptations that we found in the fossil record.
So something like a T-Rex is a small, fast tyrant dinosaur grown huge, not a big, fat tyrant dinosaur that then was evolving a few new traits to make it go a little faster.
Professor Thomas Holtz is a paleontologist at the University of Maryland, specializing in tyrannosaurs. He was part of the peer review for 𝗤𝗃's paper.
And with that adaptation, when they got the chance, tyrannosaurs could become the fastest moving large predators of all time. But they acquired it when they were still little guys, and they were probably using that fast running foot as much to get away from being eaten as to chase things to eat.
That's because during its time, 𝗤𝗄s was not the apex predator. The lush world belonged to the much larger allosaurs. Somehow, though, the allosaurs disappeared, perhaps victims of a changing environment, leaving 𝗤𝗄s and its tyrannosaur descendants a void to fill.
And so likely as soon as their major competitors were out of the scene, they were able to seize that opportunity, increase in size really quickly, and take over as the top predators of these new ecosystems.
But what drove the tyrannosaur's exponential growth remains a mystery.
So we need to find more tyrannosaurs that lived slightly after 𝗤𝗄s to really understand how quickly they were able to grow and assume those top predator roles here in North America.
Why tyrannosaurs evolved to be so big is still a huge paleontological question. Tyrannosaurus rex pushes the boundaries of any big carnivores that we know about.
Scott Persons investigates those boundaries. A research fellow at the University of Alberta, he was also lead author on a study about the dinosaur 𝗤𝗏𝗄𝗏, which was found in the Badlands of Saskatchewan in 1991. Its skeletal assembly was installed for display at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum in May 2019.
𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 earned its name because shortly after it was discovered, the field crew got really excited, and they wanted that evening to raise a glass to Tyrannosaurus rex, to toast the Tyrant King. And the only bottle that they had on hand that seemed appropriate was a very old bottle of scotch.
The team at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum used laser scanners to create 3D images of the bones. Person's analysis revealed 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝘆 to be the largest T-Rex ever found, dethroning Sioux from the Chicago Field Museum.
We say 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 is the biggest in terms of its absolute body mass, so those skeletal measurements that indicate just how much the animal would have weighed suggest that 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 is the most massive. And when you look at things like the girth of the femur, so the femoral circumference, when you look at the length of the lower jaw, when you look at even the thickness of the shoulder, 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 comes out ahead.
Thomas Holtz also peer-reviewed Person's paper.
And honest to goodness, we can't say that 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 on the lean season, when there's not much food, and Sioux in the season when there's a lot of food, Sioux may have been heavier sometimes of the year, and 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 heavier some of the other times of the year. But overall, the evidence is, on average, 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 is a larger individual than Sioux, and Sioux is already a really massive individual.
So 𝗥𝗲𝗆 is the Rex of Rexes. It's the king of the Tyrannosaurs.
An estimated 30 years old at the time of death, 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 also is the oldest T-Rex ever found.
In a world where 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 and the other big animals are around are only living to about, 30 years old, it's telling us there's a lot of turnover going. There's a lot of individuals changing over in the population. As I like to say, in the Mesozoic, life was cheap.
𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 shows evidence of a busted and then infected jaw. It's got several broken and healed ribs. It's also got a number of vertebrae in the tail that show signs of very strong compression. And that may be indicative of a place where 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗆 actually got bit by another Tyrannosaurus rex. So 𝗥𝗲𝗆's bones tell us a lot about its very long and very violent life.
Nothing, however, is written in stone.
The chances that we've actually uncovered the very biggest of all time Tyrannosaurus rex is infinitesimally small.
So it's very unlikely that 𝗥𝗲𝗆 is going to remain the king of the tyrannosaurs forever. Tyrannosaurus rex is an animal that was around for millions of years. It can be found from across Western North America. I find it impossible to believe that in all that time and space, we have been lucky enough to discover the single largest individual that ever was. There are undoubtedly bigger Tyrannosaur skeletons out there waiting to be found.
And maybe smaller ones too. Descendants of Moros and Trepidus that can fill in a 30 million year gap in our knowledge. And finally solve the mystery of how a small but swift-footed hunter became the greatest killer of all time.
We're filling in gaps in the history of well-known dinosaurs, and we're finding specimens of even the most famous dinosaur that are telling us new things about their biology, about their growth, about their size that we didn't know before. We are nowhere near at the end of learning about dinosaurs, and in generations to come, we will be knowing things about the lives of these ancient creatures that would probably blow our minds today.
An asteroid may have wiped out the tyrannosaurs, But Earth's age of superpredators was not over. We're fascinated by the T-Rex of the oceans, a beast 3 times longer and 30 times heavier than a great white shark. Megalodon hunted in the seas around the world from 23 to 3.5 million years ago.
Its prey lived globally, so wherever its prey were, so was Megalodon.
Dr. Stephen Godfrey is a paleontologist and the curator of the Calvert Marine Museum in Solomons, Maryland. The Meg didn't eye dinosaurs on the beach because those reptiles vanished 65 million years ago.
There's no possible way that Megalodon would have encountered a Tyrannosaurus rex.
The KPG extinction was about 65 million years ago. That is when the dinosaurs went extinct. Megalodon first appears about 20 million years ago. So there's about a 45 million year gap between the last occurrence of dinosaurs and the first occurrence of Megalodon.
Dr. Victor Perez is the assistant curator at the museum. Growing up where Megalodon teeth are found led him to become a paleontologist.
Locally around here, the fact that people can find them and own a piece of that history, I think that drives a lot of that fascination and curiosity.
Megalodon may be extinct, but the monster shark still gets top billing in countless novels and films. Megalodon was a global creature, but one unique location yields an impressive fossil record of the beast.
When Megalodon was alive, this area was a forested coastal plain teeming with life, adjacent to a warm, shallow sea.
The Calvert Cliffs in Maryland were once underwater and reveal much about Megalodon's life story from 20 million years ago until 7 million years ago.
Megalodon teeth are found here on land or in excavation sites because those sediments that preserve those teeth were once ocean bottom, ocean floor. And so as Megalodon was shedding its teeth, living in these coastal plain areas that were flooded, its teeth were sinking to the bottom of those shallow marine environments and being preserved as fossils.
The cliffs reveal that Megalodon evolved over 13 million years. Regardless of when an individual Megalodon lived, it was unique among sharks, both prehistoric and modern. Most reconstructions of the Meg show a supersized, plump, great white shark.
I think this is a really good scale rendering of what Megalodon looked like. Notice how bulky its body was and how massive its head and jaws were.
New research suggests that Megalodon had a much broader, dome-shaped head, a shorter, blunt snout, and a flatter jaw than great white sharks. They may have had extra long pectoral fins to stabilize their enormous bulk.
Megalodon was able to evolve to its gigantic size because natural selection sculpted it that way.
Megalodon was probably counter-shaded, like great whites, to make them less visible to prey. But great whites aren't modern-day, small relatives of Megalodon.
When Megalodon was first described, its name was Carcharodon megalodon, and what that name was indicating was that it was thought to be the ancestor of the living great white shark. Since then, we have realized that they are not as closely related.
They are like cousins, but the modern great white did not evolve from Megalodon. In other words, Megalodon is not the ancestor of the modern great white shark.
The two shark species actually lived at the same time in the same prehistoric seas.
Great white sharks appear in the fossil record about 6 million years ago, so they overlapped with Megalodon for about 3 million years.
Both of these species were likely feeding on marine mammals, so we know that the great white will feed on seals and other marine mammals, and we have evidence in the fossil record of Megalodon preying on marine mammals. We call this convergent evolution.
Some researchers believe that the smaller, more agile great whites were responsible for the extinction of the colossal Megs, but Victor thinks it was a combination of factors.
Megalodon being as large as it would require more food than a great white. So just the fact that great whites could survive with less prey gave them advantage over Megalodon. Another theory is that whales and dolphins adapted the ability to go into colder waters, and that Megalodon couldn't tolerate those cold temperatures, so there was a reduction in prey availability. And the third explanation is that when Panama formed, that landmass separated the Pacific from the Atlantic, and people suggested that that interrupted some of the migration routes for Megalodon.
But the giant sharks and the early great whites did have many things in common.
They're both carnivorous, and they both feed on animals that are too large to swallow whole. So their teeth are specialized at cutting out pieces, so they eat the animal in many bites.
We would describe both of the teeth as cutting type teeth. They are broadly triangular, they are serrated, so they function for tearing and cutting into flesh very well.
Teeth are almost all that we have left of Megalodon. Like all sharks, their skeletons consisted of fragile cartilage, which rarely survives the millennia.
Sharks have a cartilaginous skeleton, so cartilage like your nose and your ear, the flexible material, it does not readily preserve like bone does. But the teeth of the shark are similar in composition to our own.
Great whites and Megalodon shared saw-like edges on their teeth, but with some subtle differences.
Great whites have coarsely serrated teeth that are flattened from front to back, whereas the teeth of Megalodon are very finely and evenly serrated with a massive root, showing that their teeth were very firmly anchored to its jaws.
The robust root probably helps with dealing with the intense pressure when it bit down on a large whale, potentially encountering bone and things like that.
This is a tail vertebra from an extinct dolphin, and we know from its size and shape that it was right down just in front of the fluke, of the tail fluke of the dolphin that propelled it through the water. And what's remarkable about this specimen is that on both sides of the vertebra, there are these deep gouges. The only way that you can get deep gouges like this on both sides of the vertebra, which in a normal vertebra wouldn't be there, would be that this vertebra became wedged between two adjacent Megalodon teeth.
It's evidence that Megalodon was a strategic hunter.
Megalodon's strategy would be to attack the tail of the animal, effectively immobilize it, and then that animal would bleed out, and at that point it would just be scavenging. So there's very low risk of getting injured if that is your strategy.
But was the Meg a colossal predator, or just a supersized opportunist?
Each gouge, though, represents a separate bite by the Megalodon. So it's as though Megalodon is saying to this dolphin, "You are never going to get away from me." In other words, it chased down or ambushed its prey. Now that's not to say that it wasn't also a scavenger like great whites are.
Megalodon didn't limit itself to dolphins.
This is a fossilized sperm whale tooth. There are a series of gouge marks on here. So what this shows is that there was a trophic interaction, a predatory interaction between Megalodon and a sperm whale. This is very aggressive type of behavior by a Megalodon to try to kill the sperm whale.
This attack strategy may have seen Megalodons first tear off the victim's fins, leaving it helpless and quickly growing weak enough to consume. It's the same technique great whites use today to prevent being injured by large prey. And, like great whites, when the legendary monster did hunt, it didn't always succeed.
This is a dorsal vertebra from a relatively small whale. What this shows is that there was a massive trauma that it experienced where the whole bottom of the vertebra was broken away. This whale was struck either from behind or ambushed from below by Megalodon. But what's fascinating about this specimen is that the whale did not die from this impact. And that is, we know that because of this new bone growth that was attempting to mend this vertebra, make the best of a really bad situation. This vertebra, I think, shows evidence of failed predation where Megalodon was not always successful at killing its prey.
So basically, if the shark bit into a prey item and it didn't succeed in killing it, and then that animal healed, it means that it survived that predation event. So that would tell us that that animal was alive when it happened.
Like other sharks in the same order, Megalodon may have used warm lagoons as nurseries. After giving birth, the mother sharks abandoned their newly minted offspring to the relative safety of these protected bays.
The first ever study that's proposed that Megalodon used nursery habitats was in Panama.
Although most sharks are apex predators as adults, they're fair game when they're little, and just after birth, they're completely on their own. Inlets and bays have plenty of food for small sharks, and large predators avoid the shallow water. Possible nursery areas for Megalodon may have likely been found in Mexico, Florida, and Chile, as well as Panama, and research is ongoing.
It has been suggested that the northern end of Calvert Cliffs was also a nursery area for Megalodon.
Even here, baby Megalodons faced challenges.
Adult megs were probably also cannibals. From time to time, meg teeth are found that show that they were bitten by another meg tooth. The possibility exists that some of those meg-bitten teeth might have come about as a result of meg-on-meg predation.
Megalodon teeth still reveal the most about the monster shark.
The size of the megalodon tooth tells us how large the animal was. There's a relationship between the size of the megalodon tooth and the length of the body.
There are so many megalodon teeth scattered around the world that researchers stay busy.
Like all other sharks, it produced multiple teeth, hundreds of teeth throughout its lifetime, and would have shed those teeth.
So how long did it take Megalodon to grow into a 60-foot-long predator? Researchers at DePaul University in Chicago used CT scans to examine incremental growth bands in a rare Megalodon vertebrae. The vertebrae were unearthed in the 19th century in Antwerp, Belgium. Each vertebrae measured about 6 inches in diameter. Based on comparisons to vertebrae of modern sharks, the scientists estimated they came from an individual about 30 feet in length.
Sharks, they have indeterminate growth, which means that they will continue to grow throughout their entire life. The longer their life expectancy is, the more time they have to grow, so the larger they can get.
The images revealed the vertebrae have 46 growth bands. These bands could represent years in the shark's life, like tree rings.
When you're looking at tree rings, you're looking at a living thing that is immobile. So there's different growth rates when it's warm versus when it's cold. Most sharks are not immobile. They are moving about to different areas. So the duration in which they are in warm water versus cold water may not equate to a year.
If each ring does represent a year, then the individual was 46 years old when it died. Extrapolation would mean this megalodon would have been nearly 60 feet long had it lived for 100 years, and was over 6 feet long at birth. The study also suggests that the shark grew at an average rate of about 6.3 inches per year. The proposed growth curve would put its potential lifespan close to a century. As a major predator that lived in the past, Megalodon played an important role in shaping our oceans today. Knowing how the creatures grew, how long they lived, and how their pups survived helps us understand the role sharks play in the evolution of marine ecosystems.
Megalodon was the top marine predator for about 20 million years. Without a doubt, it helped to shape the modern marine ecosystem. It helped to drive a morphological arms race that reverberated throughout the rest of the marine ecosystem.
Despite periodic claims to the contrary, Megalodon is definitely extinct.
If Megalodon was still alive today, fishermen would not be speculating about encounters. They would 100% know whether or not Megalodon was present.
No matter how big and powerful you are, if you can't adapt to a changing environment, you will become extinct.
Every megalodon tooth that has been found is ancient, and until a fresh tooth or some other form of proof is discovered, the ancient beast will stay in the past. Megalodon did not meet the challenge of our changing seas, but great whites did, and still rule the oceans today. They're exquisitely designed predators. 18-foot-long adults tip the scales at over 1 ton. They chase their prey at 35 miles per hour, and then strike it with 300 lethal, replaceable teeth. These are the Ferraris of the shark world. And like fine-tuned cars, they're extremely complex. Despite being the most famous sharks in the world, scientists still know little about them.
Great white sharks are huge animals, and yet they are able to move in some of the most inhospitable and remote habitats on Earth. And as a result, we humans just don't see them very often.
Evolutionary biologist Dr. 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗀𝗍𝗀 has uncovered some of the secrets closely held by these elusive animals. By using a genetic process made popular for crime scenes, she's created a great white family tree. The DNA analysis reveals that the great whites may be great mothers, possibly great siblings, and maybe even great partners.
Genetics is a really useful tool to help us look at great white shark behavior and habitat use in a different way. Traditionally, in order to study great whites, you have to catch them and attach a tag, and then you have to be able to follow them. With genetics, we don't actually have to necessarily tag a shark. We can just get a tiny sample as it's passing by, and we can get enough information about that animal to compare it to other great white sharks all over the world.
Like so many of us, Toby is fascinated by great whites.
When I got a chance to see a great white shark in the water for the first time, the top of my head kind of blew off, and it was just amazing. It was like seeing a celebrity.
That's why she's traveled to a remote Mexican coast off Baja California Sur, hoping to learn more about great white shark mating and reproduction.
The area where we went to see if we could find great white shark pups was pretty remote. It was a really amazing place, really incredible arid desert ecosystems right up against this flat coastal bay that had just chock full of gray whales and, as it turned out, baby great white sharks.
Research seemed to point to the shallow bay as the place to find infant shark pups, possibly born to females from Guadalupe Island, roughly 220 miles away.
They will stay in the nursery habitat until they get big enough to where they can rejoin the adult sharks in the better offshore foraging areas.
Juvenile white sharks have been spotted in other parts of the world, but not many. Toby's team worked with the local fishermen to find infant great whites in the bay. They used a tested method to catch and safely release the baby sharks. Within a few days, they caught and safely released 12 infant and juvenile great whites, but not before Toby took individual samples of their DNA.
I was going for a very, very small tissue sample from one of the fins, and then was ready with a little vial of preservative that I could just pop it right into.
She wanted to find out if the pups were related to known adults or each other.
Lots of people have collected DNA from adult great white sharks, but collecting DNA from the babies can really help us to shed light on the other side of the great white shark life cycle that we really know very little about. We can actually find out where they are potentially giving birth.
With most shark species, it's common for a single litter of pups to have multiple fathers.
Females use a strategy called multiple paternity, which means that a female will actually mate with multiple males over the course of one breeding season. But instead of using that sperm to fertilize her eggs, she will store that sperm from these multiple males until she needs it. Sperm from different males may mix, and so those pups that all have the same mom will end up with different fathers.
It's thought that this is because most female sharks have little say about who they mate with. But no one has ever seen great whites mate.
That would be amazing. It would answer a lot of questions.
Great whites may be different and mate differently from other shark species.
One thing that makes them different is that they're so big. They don't tend to aggregate in big groups like a lot of smaller sharks.
Creating a family tree could help scientists to understand the mysterious life cycle of this species and ultimately help to protect them.
If we can identify baby sharks and possibly connect them to an adult population, we can actually make a case for protecting the entirety of that shark's range, from adulthood to infancy and back again.
In her Florida lab, Toby used the fingerprint technique to compare the 𝗤𝗲𝗆 baby's DNA samples to an extensive database of adult great white shark DNA.
DNA fingerprinting is using little stretches of DNA to compare individuals with a great degree of certainty. And it's exactly the same method that crime labs use to catch murderers, except that we are using shark DNA.
She personally took 12 samples from the baby sharks and compared them to a healthy database of adult white sharks. Scientists have been getting DNA from Guadalupe's adult sharks for decades. Great whites can live as long as humans.
The estimate that we have right now is they could live as many as 70 to 100 years. So they live as long as most people, but that might actually be an underestimate.
Females don't reach maturity until they're about 16 years old. And then they'll give birth to 2 to 15 pups about every 3 to 4 years. A great white pregnancy is more than twice as long as humans, likely 20 months or longer.
So they don't reproduce very quickly, they grow fairly slowly, and they live a long time, which actually makes them a lot more similar to mammals than to other kinds of fish.
Toby hoped to find matches between the 𝗤𝗆 pups and known females from Guadalupe Island.
We were really hoping that we would see an immediate connection with one of the adults at Guadalupe, because Guadalupe is fairly close to this nursery site. So that was kind of the first thing that I went to look for.
But the analysis was disappointing.
It was really interesting when we saw that the pups that we were sampling, they weren't all just this one size of brand new baby that had just been born that past year. There was actually a mix of really new baby sharks and some of the older individuals, probably from the last year or two litters that had grown up a little bit but still hadn't left that nursery area.
As she pushed forward, she discovered something completely unexpected.
We found multiple pairs of siblings. Specifically, we found one brother-brother pair and another sister-brother pair full siblings, but some of them were older than the others. So what we concluded from that is that even though these sharks were brother and sister, they'd been born to the same mom and the same dad in different litters.
Not just the same mother, the same father too.
What's really interesting about that, to me, is that that male and that specific female mated with each other more than once.
Wherever the parent sharks came from, they seem to have established a connection. And while great whites aren't traditional parents, mother sharks do what they can to protect their young.
What they do is they give birth in a place where the babies will either be born into or swim into a nursery habitat that is relatively shallow and protected from really large predators.
Female great whites don't stay close to their pups after giving birth. The massive mothers need massive prey after delivering at least 750 pounds of babies. Once the last pup is born, they're off to find food, fast. But they do their very best to ensure that their babies have a sanctuary where they can grow, find food, and be safe from predators until they're bigger and can take their place atop the food chain.
Great white sharks are intelligent. They have a long time to get to know their environment. They've not only had hundreds of millions of years of evolution, but an individual from this species can live to see potentially generations of its own offspring join that same population.
From this revolutionary genetic study, it does seem that siblings may stick close to each other, possibly for many years. It's part of their survival strategy as they perfect their hunting techniques.
Great white sharks, as an apex predator, are in charge of keeping the other levels of animals in the environment healthy by weeding out the sick or the weak, the ones that shouldn't be reproducing.
These important and misunderstood predators have even more sophisticated strategies for healing wounds and even fighting cancer. Multiple scientists and organizations teamed up to sequence the great white shark genome.
Great white sharks have a huge genome compared to humans. They have almost twice as many chromosomes as we do. And what that means is they don't necessarily have more genes than we do, but they have different numbers of copies of those genes. So where we may have 1 or 2 genes coding for, say, an antibody in our immune system, sharks won't just have 1 copy of that immune system gene, they may have 10.
Sharks have survived for roughly 450 million years, through all of Earth's mass extinctions. And in the 16 million years great whites have been around, they've perfected some amazing biology. The scientists found genes that play a role in DNA repair and damage response, which could explain how these sharks grow to be so big without the same occurrence of cancer that we have.
One of the things that the investigators who recently sequenced the great white shark genome found was that a lot of the extra copies have to do with wound healing and, in particular, clotting factors. The genome of these sharks may be why they are so effective at being a survivor in the ocean. This healing power that these sharks have has definitely been one of the keys to their survival. It's almost like a great white shark superpower, like Wolverine and the X-Men.
Which means that the great white's reign as the ocean's super predator shows no sign of ending. Earth's super predators have often been synonymous with one thing: teeth. And one hunter was particularly known for them. Forget tigers. Forget lions. And leopards. One ferocious feline killed its prey with canines nearly a foot long. But while we know the beast weighed close to half a ton and walked on paws 3 times larger than a Bengal tiger's, 𝗦𝗲𝗏, the saber-toothed cat, remains one of the most enigmatic predators, past or present. Scientists on different continents are breaking into 𝗦𝗲𝗏's secret life through those incredible fangs.
So there's lots of advantages of having these elongated sabers, one of which is the ability to have your prey bleed out very quickly.
Dr. Larissa DeSantis is a vertebrate paleontologist at Vanderbilt University.
The saber teeth are actually as long, if not longer, than some T-Rex teeth.
No one has been able to confirm the sex of any 𝗦𝗏𝗏 fossil. Unlike many animals, males and females were about the same size.
They don't display a large degree of sexual dimorphism, which is that the males are fundamentally larger than the females. So it is pretty hard to tell apart males and females, and really not possible in these extinct saber-toothed cats.
Dr. DeSantis unpacks saber-tooth behavior by examining minute details on and in their teeth. Larissa works on 𝗦𝗏𝗏 fatalis, which roamed North America and chased its prey into the sticky La Brea tar pits. 𝗦𝗏𝗏 was the only creature during the Pleistocene with foot-long fangs. Despite their fierce nature and lethal weaponry, her research at La Brea reveals surprising details about the importance of saber fangs. 𝗦𝗏𝗏 kittens didn't sport true fangs until they were about 3 years old.
There is a true evolutionary benefit to having that tooth come completely in before the other tooth, the baby tooth, falls out. And that provides evidence that these animals were potentially provisioned or cared for because those teeth were so critical to their survival.
The cat's impressive cuspids slowly grew while the baby teeth were still present, adding protection to the developing fangs.
And what's really neat is that there's actually this sort of little groove in the inside of that deciduous tooth where the adult tooth will start to actually come in as well. The saber teeth would actually grow in alongside that baby tooth until it was erupted, at which point then they had their adult saber.
But then, those fangs grew twice as quickly as those of modern-day lions. That's twice as fast as human fingernails, about 1/4 inch per month. Until their weaponry was fully developed, 𝗦𝗏𝗏 kittens needed to stick close to mom.
It was taking a long time for these teeth to develop, and those were that critical for hunting. Then there may have been an extended period of parental care, allowing for these animals to become more mature and able to hunt effectively on the landscape.
This suggests that prehistoric cats may have even had expanded family structures, similar to wolves.
There has to be some level of care for the young individuals that's compensating for the fact that it's going to take a long time for these sabers to develop.
We're not sure if 𝗦𝗏𝗏 hunted in pairs or in prides, but they worked together.
We think that they were at least hunting in some sort of multiple cat scenario because of the high abundance of saber-toothed cats found at La Brea.
𝗦𝗏𝗏 didn't chase its prey over vast grasslands. This was an ambush predator.
In general, a saber-tooth's back limbs were a bit shorter and more robust, and the front limbs were a little longer. It preferred to hunt using short bursts.
The saber-toothed cats were taking down prey from more forested ecosystems, eating things like tapirs or maybe some camels or deer.
The prehistoric landscape was rich with forests and prairies, with many big beasts, giant ground sloths, short-faced bears, mastodons, and camel-like creatures lived side by side with Smilodon. Saber-toothed cats were the apex predators throughout Pleistocene America, first appearing about 2.5 million years ago, then vanishing just 8,000 years ago.
Había mucha disponibilidad de presas.
There was a large variety of prey, and saber-toothed cats would choose the largest and heaviest. It could consume a young mastodon, so a 1,000–1,500 kilo animal might have been hunted by a Smilodon.
Smilodon disappeared frustratingly close to us in time, going extinct around the end of the last glacial period, when humans were relatively new to the Americas. Did they meet their match in us?
La mayor parte de los herbívoros estaban adaptados a vivir en lugares.
The majority of herbivores had adapted to live in wide open spaces, in the giant grasslands of South America. As it got hotter, environments like forests and jungles developed faster, which means that the number of giant herbivores began to decline. And in the last ice age, many were also being hunted by humans. A combination of these two factors, we're talking about climate change that altered ecosystems, plus human beings, delivered the fatal blow to many species.
The other great thing about 𝗤𝗲𝗆 is that we're finding these fossils from about 50,000 years ago till the present. And so they have different ages and different dates. And so we can begin to actually tease apart the cause of this extinction, the effects of climate change and human arrival on the impacts of these animals and why they may have gone extinct.
Saber-toothed cats were incredibly successful for a very long time, and some scientists believe that we're just in a lull between Smilodon and the emergence of a new species.
Today, we only see one single feline species alive that has a similar skull morphology like that of the saber-toothed cat.
The clouded leopard is a mid-sized cat that prowls the tropical forests of Indonesia with very elongated canine teeth.
If they're able to more effectively hunt by having elongated canines, then that could get sort of fixed in that population, and you could see sort of these elongated canines yet again.
Long, killing fangs evolved so many times during the past 20 million years that there's every reason to believe that a new saber-toothed cat just might roam Earth again.